This is a great American crime story about a misfit who saw his chance and grabbed it.
He became the largest purveyor of counterfeit memorabilia in the country. He was a true perfectionist in every aspect of his business.
It was a ride. It was a wild ride. He made just gargantuan super lotto type money.
It just adds up to millions and millions of dollars.
Find out how he did it next on Masterminds. In 1996, the Chicago FBI discovered that Michael Jordan's autograph was being forged.
These athletes do not like going into a retail environment and seeing a jersey or a ball on the shelf that they know they didn't sign.
With Jordan autographs selling at up to $1,000 apiece, authorities took the problem seriously.
But the FBI doesn't train agents who are adept at the sports memorabilia business. This is something, once the problem was recognized, had to be addressed.
The FBI turned to Upper Deck, one of America's biggest sports card manufacturers.
Upper Deck has always had its own internal fraud and investigation team. So we were brought in to help verify Michael's signature. It takes very close inspection to detect if an autograph is fake or not.
After months of investigation, the team determined that thousands of Jordan forgeries had flooded the market.
And the quality of the forgeries were incredible.
That really set off the light bulb with us that we had to coordinate with the FBI and do a lot more to clean up this industry.
The Chicago office of the FBI conducted an undercover operation.
Hoping to discover who was behind the forgeries, agents first targeted street-level distributors.
In December of 1996, the investigation started to charge some of their distributors.
When the FBI searched these distributors' storage facilities, they made a shocking discovery.
There's not only a huge problem with forging of Michael Jordan's autograph, but all famous athletes' autographs were being forged.
They were forging on everything. Basketballs, posters, photographs, jerseys, Nike shoes, Wheaties boxes, you name it, they would forge on it.
But all the arrested distributors would tell the Chicago FBI was that the goods originated somewhere in the San Diego area.
So, taking the information from our Chicago office, it was decided that San Diego would open up an investigation.
The FBI initiated Operation Bullpen in an effort to track down who was behind the forgeries.
We were going into it somewhat blindly, not knowing how these people conducted their business, whether they were fairly open or if they were very secretive.
When agents attempted to trace the forgeries through the complex web of buying and selling, they always hit a dead end.
We simply couldn't penetrate to get details about the whole criminal network.
Then, in 2001, the biggest shock came. The FBI discovered that the collector's holy grail, the autographed Babe Ruth game ball, was being forged and sold by the hundreds.
A Babe Ruth baseball always has been, probably always will be, one of the most valuable items you can get. Every counterfeit baseball was teamed with a certificate of authenticity, which appeared to attest to the fact that it was genuine.
The FBI estimated that the gang was ripping off the public to the tune of $10 million a month.
I think we've really got a flavor for how big this thing is, and it's staggering, to be quite honest.
It was huge, this fraud that they were perpetrating.
There was not $1 million, but $1 billion a year industry designed to mislead and defraud the American public.
As the FBI continued to strike out, the mastermind behind the forgeries kept hitting home runs.
I put out between 125 and 165,000 units onto the market between 95 and 99. There's quite a few people looking at things at home on their walls wondering if they're real.
Wayne Bray built the biggest sports memorabilia forgery operation in U.S. history, eluded authorities for years, and made himself millions. The question is, how did he do it? Wayne Bray was raised by his father in a middle-class San Diego suburb.
My dad was in law enforcement. He was a probation officer for approximately 25 years. He retired early to open one of the very first card stores in San Diego. He was always a very big baseball fan.
But unlike his dad, Bray had no interest in sports.
Wayne was a rebel without a cause. He got into trouble, ran afoul of the law.
I was a little bit mischievous, became involved with the wrong crowd. I was using drugs heavily for approximately 3 or 4 years.
After being discovered living in his car, Bray's father sends him to rehab.
I only had about 3 or 4 weeks clean at that point. I got a phone call from my mother telling me that my dad had a stroke and he needed me to come out to San Diego to run his baseball card store. Now, the responsibility given to me by my father, I think, is what kept me sober, is what kept me clean.
With his dad's help, Bray opens his own store in Vista, California.
I decided I liked cards enough that I wanted to try and have my own business because I didn't want to be supported by him.
But Bray quickly discovers he's got a problem.
People would walk into the store and they'd say, "Boy, that's really nice. Oh, I'd buy that, but it's not signed by the player." And after hearing, "Too bad it's not signed," one too many times, it really started to become a problem. When the World Series was canceled with the baseball strike, business went down the tubes. The turning point for me was the day Greg Marino walked into my store with his Mickey Mantle plate.
Mickey Mantle plates, nothing.
Grabbed a pen and signed a perfect Mickey Mantle signature right across the front of it. And at that point, the light bulbs went off.
How much now?
He could see in that one moment how it would snowball and they could make just gargantuan super lotto type money.
This was right around the time that Mickey Mantle was dying. Bray knew how valuable Mickey Mantle's signature was.
Seizing his chance, Bray calls one of his distributors and tells him he has an unlimited supply of perfect Mickey Mantle autographs.
The day that Mickey Mantle died, my client in New Jersey called and faxed me an order for approximately $30,000 worth of Mickey Mantle signed memorabilia.
Bray puts Marino to work, forging dozens of Mickey Mantle autographs.
That's the one that just made me go bing. If somebody's got $30,000 to spend, maybe they have $300,000 to spend. At the time, I really didn't even consider it a risk. I considered it a way to make money.
It was just easy money. It was money falling from the sky.
My client in New Jersey was so happy that he basically went off the chart and just said, "Who else can you get?" Which really meant, who else can you do? It was at that point I realized I needed to take it to another level. I had the ability to achieve and attain everything that I'd ever hoped and dreamed for.
He wanted to make sure that whatever forgery he sold looked like the real thing. So he decided to start a library of authentic signatures.
I dropped off the signatures with Greg and said, "Start practicing." When I came back 3 or 4 days later and looked at his signatures, they were all crap. So it was start practicing harder. It was very important for me to have Greg get every signature right. If anything wasn't perfect, it went in the dumpster.
After working for weeks, Bray's tough coaching finally pays off.
He eventually became good enough that he could copy that signature perfectly. Greg became a phenomenal forger, probably the best forger out there.
With a master forger and major distributor in Bray's back pocket, the orders flood in.
Greg and I work night and day just to keep up with selling thousands of pieces per week.
When you look at Wayne Bray and Greg Marino, they actually talked the same language. They understood each other.
And the guys were a perfect fit for a criminal enterprise. Greg Marino was the master forger, an artist at heart, laid back, easygoing.
Wayne is a very high-strung individual with a lot of business savvy. He's a real go-getter.
He wasn't content with a cheap buck. He could have taken a couple $100,000 and left. But he wasn't satisfied with doing that.
To expand his operation, Bray now relocates to an isolated warehouse.
He was a master of insulating himself from the general public. He wanted to organize a major criminal business that was immune from law enforcement scrutiny.
Instead, Bray wants to make millions. He sets his sights on sports memorabilia's holy grail, the Babe Ruth autographed game ball.
There are very few balls available on the market that are a nice, clean, white baseball with the proper commissioner's name on it that dates back to when Babe Ruth would have been playing baseball.
So Bray decides if he can't find them, he'll create them.
I went to the hardware store and bought a big, heavy file and just started filing the names off of new baseballs.
Then, to match the markings from the 1920s, he creates a period stamp.
It had the proper commissioner's name on it that dates back to when Babe Ruth would have been playing baseball.
Next, Bray focuses on the most difficult problem, aging the balls.
I would take them out to the mud on the side of my warehouse and rolling them around, dirtying them up, basically giving them that old world feel.
Bray now modifies a hot dog cooker.
He was baking them until those balls would look like they were ancient balls.
After completing the aging process, Bray turns his attention to the autograph.
What do you have in the way of old pens?
I started researching what types of pens were used during what eras, whether or not it was a quill pen or a fountain pen, those types of things. What types of inks were used, how the ink was extracted from the bottles and put into the fountain pens, those types of things.
He would then take the product that he had painstakingly taken weeks to produce and age properly over to Greg Marino.
He would sit right next to Greg and make sure he would do every single item correctly.
So after I would get the signatures on the balls, put them out in the sun, waited for that ink to just fade just the right amount.
Bray then makes one final touch.
Back in the early days of baseball, collectors wanted a way to preserve what they felt was going to be a very special memento, so they would shellac the balls.
Bray would use a nail, which he would drive into the thread of the ball, and then he would dip it in a can of shellac.
But after the shellac dries, Bray realizes he has a problem.
They had a ball with an authentic and beautiful signature of Babe Ruth. And it was shellac, so it really looked old, but it didn't smell right. And so to solve that problem, they would stick it in a bag of mothballs and dog food for a couple days.
The alkaline content of the mixture chemically bonds with the shellac and eliminates any smell. The balls are now perfect, but Bray knows without certificates of authenticity, they're worthless.
What I had to do was start my own authentication company.
Bray now makes an ingenious move. He hires a relative of Joe DiMaggio to authenticate his forgeries.
James DiMaggio was a restaurateur who he was not an authenticator. He had no background in sports memorabilia. Wayne devised the idea of using the name of J. DiMaggio because the DiMaggio name is so resonant in sports. The public bought it hook, line, and sinker.
At $10,000 apiece, Bray makes a killing.
The magnitude of it was incredible. It just adds up to millions and millions of dollars.
Wayne was the one single greatest source of forgeries in the country.
Wayne Bray is now the home run king of counterfeit sports memorabilia. But the FBI will soon threaten his winning streak with a player of their own. Wayne Bray and his forger, Greg Marino, are making millions with their counterfeit sports memorabilia.
We spent our money on expensive toys, motorcycles, cars, jewelry, strip clubs. We just spent it.
They were becoming drunk on their success.
These guys had fun. It was a ride. It was a wild ride that they got on.
But Bray's happiness is short-lived.
It seemed like the more money that I made, the scarier it was getting because I realized I was going to get caught sooner or later.
To make matters worse, Greg Marino now starts causing problems.
I thought I owned Greg, but Greg became swayed by other people. His mother and his father saw the money start pouring in and decided that they all wanted a piece of it.
If Wayne had another source who could do the type of quality forgeries, I believe he would have left him. Unfortunately, there was nobody producing forgeries like Greg. They formed rather an unhappy marriage.
Hoping to buy their silence, Bray pays them off.
Bray didn't trust Marino. Bray didn't trust a lot of people.
But just as Bray starts losing control of his team, the FBI decides to draft a new player for theirs.
We decided we needed an undercover operative, somebody who had a background in sports memorabilia, somebody who could walk in and talk the talk, walk the walk, and relate to the distributors.
They find their man in special agent and sports fanatic John Ferreira.
The main goal was to bring the forgers and any of their associates into the office, tape record our conversation, and get them to admit that they were doing illegal acts. They saw that I had the money, and they were working with me. They were telling me more, and everything I did was tape recorded.
Ferreira gathers information from dozens of small-time players in the forgery world.
The name that we kept hearing over and over was Greg Marino as a possible forger and Wayne Bray as the mastermind.
Wayne Bray, like a giant spider, was at the center of a web that stretched out across the country.
Once we had identified that Wayne was a huge player in forged memorabilia, we decided to try and send John in cold.
I went to Wayne Bray's office and was calling for whomever was in there, and no one answered. All I could see was there was a lot of memorabilia in there. I saw a box of baseballs signed by Jackie Robinson and Roberto Clemente. I mean, a box of them. That doesn't exist.
I walked in and I saw this guy in my warehouse.
And Wayne Bray starts yelling at me.
And I'm like, how did you find me, by the way? I wasn't in the phone book.
He was very paranoid, very suspicious. Well, with that tells me, of course, that an honest person would not be suspicious, would try to be helpful.
Suspecting Bray is behind the ring, the FBI sets up a wiretap, hoping to catch him in the act.
When we first started listening to Wayne's business, obviously our hope was that on the telephone, he might speak openly about the forged nature of the memorabilia. But being the mastermind that Wayne was, he did not. Everyone always talked about the memorabilia as if it were real, and it was frustrating.
I felt that my phone was tapped. Something just didn't feel right.
Fake. I don't know what you're talking.
Finally, one of Bray's clients slips up and requests a forgery.
We got him. We got him.
But his huge mistake was a windfall for us.
The only thing going through my mind is sheer panic, complete and sheer panic. I needed to find out if they had me, and if so, how bad did they have me? My paranoia was becoming increasingly deep.
I need to know what they know.
Because I just couldn't sit still inside my own skin.
Hounded by these fears, Wayne Bray hires a former federal agent to investigate, to see if, in fact, he's being pursued.
Three days later, he came back and he says, they have you and they're watching you right now.
They know everything.
Bray decides to come clean.
Watching you for months.
But before he does, he talks to his dad.
Went and told him that I was turning myself in. His response was, good, that's the right thing to do. You need to go do this and get it out of your life.
Wayne Bray is very smart in coming in because the way it works in investigations, the first one in the door usually gets the best deal.
In return for a reduced sentence, Bray identifies every player in his operation.
October 13th, 1999 was a big takedown.
Greg Marino and served hard time, 6 years. Mom and Dad, on the other hand, they got probationary type sentences.
The mastermind himself is sentenced to only 6 months for mail and wire fraud.
I went sour for everybody because they got so big. If they would have maybe stayed small and local, they might have been able to fly below the radar screen. Wayne Bray organized and created something that was the best at what was going on, and that's an accomplishment, even if it's a criminal accomplishment.
He was outstanding as a criminal, and he was outstanding as a cooperator. It's my hope that he's only outstanding in the rest of his life as well.
Wayne Bray was released from prison in July 2001 and is running a legitimate business.
Now, I try and do what I'm supposed to do, when I'm supposed to do it, whether I like it or not. And to me, that's the true measure of a man.